My father once told me, with that pitying smile he reserves for failures, that I would never be a real lawyer. He said I lacked the spine for the kill. For 33 years, his voice was the ceiling I could not break through. But this morning, a courier delivered a heavy cream envelope to my desk. It was not a lawsuit. It was a merger application from his firm to mine. He says it is just business, but sharks do not beg unless they are bleeding. The coffee in the break room at Whitebridge Legal Group always tasted like burned hazelnuts and ambition. It was the only luxury we could afford to ruin. I stood by the window of our second-floor office, looking down at the gray streets of Ravenport, Illinois. The rain was coming down in sheets, washing the grime off the brick facades of the revitalized warehouse district we called home. We were not in the glass towers downtown. We were not in the marble lobbies where the air conditioning smelled like expensive cologne and silence. We were here, in the grit, 5 attorneys fighting for every inch of ground we claimed. I was 33 years old. I had built this firm from a laptop on a dining room table into a boutique practice that scared the city council. We were known for meticulous compliance work, the kind of unsexy, document-heavy law that required eyes like lasers and a patience that bordered on masochism. We did not chase ambulances. We chased paper trails until they led to the truth. My senior associate, Maya Hargrove, walked in. She was holding a stack of files thick enough to stop a bullet. She dropped them on the table with a thud that rattled my empty mug. "We need to talk about the billing hours for the Transport Authority case," she said. I turned from the window. Maya was brilliant, sharp-edged, and terrified of failure in a way that mirrored my own soul. She had left a cushy corporate gig to join me 2 years ago because she wanted to do work that mattered. Most days, I worried I was failing her. "I will review them tonight," I said. "Do not worry about the cap. If we go over, I will eat the cost. We are not cutting corners on discovery." Maya sighed, rubbing her temples. "You always eat the cost. Ella, that is why we are the best firm in Ravenport that nobody has heard of. People have heard of us," I said, though the defensive snap in my voice was quicker than I intended. Maya gave me a look that said she knew exactly which nerve she had struck. She knew about the shadow I lived under. Everyone in the Illinois legal community knew. You could not practice law in this state without knowing the name Graham White. Graham White, managing partner of White and Lyle LLP, a titan, a monument, my father. I checked the time on the wall clock. It was 11:30 in the morning. "I have to go," I said, grabbing my coat. "The Bar Association luncheon." Maya grimaced. "Do you have to? You know he will be there." "That is exactly why I have to go," I said. "If I stop showing up, he wins. It is a territorial thing, like dogs marking fire hydrants." But with $300 ties, I drove downtown, the windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the storm. The Ravenport Bar Association held its monthly luncheons at the Grand Hotel, a relic of the 1920s with chandeliers the size of small cars and carpet that muffled the sound of footsteps. It was the heart of the old guard. When I walked into the ballroom, the noise hit me first, the low roar of male voices, the clink of silverware, the polite laughter that never reached anyone's eyes. I smoothed the lapel of my blazer. It was off the rack, tailored to look expensive. My father's suits were bespoke, imported from London. I could spot the difference from 50 feet away. I grabbed a glass of water and tried to find a table near the back, somewhere I could eat my rubbery chicken in peace and leave before the keynote speech. "Ella." The voice was not loud, but it cut through the room like a gavel strike. I froze. I took a breath, centered myself, and turned around. "Hello? Dad?" I said. Graham White stood there, holding a scotch he likely had not paid for. He was 62, silver-haired, immaculate. He looked like he had been born wearing a suit. He was flanked by 2 younger associates from his firm, men I recognized from their LinkedIn profiles as top-tier hires from Ivy League schools. They looked at me with polite confusion. "I did not think you would make it," Graham said. He smiled. It was a terrifying expression. It involved his mouth, but his eyes remained flat, assessing, cold. I heard you were bogged down with some traffic violations or zoning disputes. We just closed a major compliance audit for the city water department. I said, keeping my voice level. We saved the municipality $4 million in potential fines. Graham chuckled. He turned to the associate on his left. This is my daughter, Ella. She has a little shop over in the warehouse district. She likes to play lawyer. It is adorable, really. Keeps her busy. The associate laughed. It was a nervous, wet sound. I am not playing. Dad, I said. My hands were clenched at my sides, hidden by the fabric of my trousers. Whitebridge Legal Group is a legitimate firm. We are growing. Of course you are, Graham said, his tone dripping with patronizing warmth. He reached out and patted my shoulder. The touch made my skin crawl. It was the way you patted a dog that had successfully fetched a stick. I am just saying, Ella, do not overextend yourself. The real law, the kind we do at White and Lyle, requires a certain fortitude. You have always been soft. He looked at the donors standing nearby, a wealthy couple who funded the local legal aid clinic. You remember Ella? Graham said to them. She used to cry when she lost at Monopoly. Now she has her own little letterhead. The donors smiled politely, looking uncomfortable. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks, a familiar, suffocating mix of shame and rage. I was 33 years old. I was a member of the bar in good standing. I had won cases against partners twice my age. But in front of him, I was 6 years old, holding a report card with a B+, waiting for him to ask why it was not an A. I have a meeting, I said, my voice tight. It was good to see you. Graham. I did not call him Dad again. I turned and walked away, my heels clicking sharply on the marble floor. I could feel his eyes on my back. I could feel his amusement. He did not even hate me. Hate would imply I was a threat. To him, I was a joke. I made it to the exit before I let myself breathe. The cold, damp air of the parking valet stand felt like salvation. I am going to bury him. I whispered to the rain. I did not know how, and I did not know when, but I swore it. When I got back to the office, the atmosphere had shifted. The quiet hum of productivity was replaced by a vibrating tension. Maya was standing at my desk, her face pale. What happened? I asked, shaking off my umbrella. We got a call. Maya said, 10 minutes ago. It was the general counsel for North Vale Health Cooperative. I stopped. North Vale was not just a client. North Vale was the client. They were the largest healthcare network in the region, spanning 3 counties. With budgets in the hundreds of millions, they were a whale. What do they want? I asked. They want us, Maya said. Specifically us. They need independent counsel for an internal compliance audit. Rumor is there are billing irregularities, big ones. They want an outsider, someone with no ties to the local political machine. I sat down heavily in my chair. This was it. This was the league jump. White and Lyle represented massive insurance companies, banks, and hospital chains. If we landed North Vale, we were not just a boutique anymore. We were players. Set up the meeting. I said. Maya hesitated. Ella, listen to me. Healthcare audits are dangerous. If we find something real, this could explode into federal scrutiny fast. We are 5 people. If the Department of Justice gets involved, we will be buried in subpoenas for the next 5 years. We do not have the manpower. We will hire the manpower. I said, it is risky. Maya pressed. If we miss something, it is malpractice. If we find something and report it, we make enemies of the most powerful board of directors in the state. I looked at her. I thought about Graham's face at the luncheon. I thought about the way he said playing lawyer. We are doing it. Maya, I said, we are taking the meeting. 2 days later, I signed the engagement letter. The retainer was larger than our entire operating budget for the previous year. I stared at the check on my desk, feeling a surge of triumph that was immediately chased by a cold, gnawing anxiety. I was not enough. I was a fraud. I was a little girl playing dress-up in a courtroom. I pushed the thought down. I was Ella White. I was real. The next morning, the mail arrived. Tessa, my paralegal, dropped a stack of envelopes on my desk. Most of it was standard: invoices, court notices, junk mail. But at the bottom of the pile was a plain manila envelope. No return address, just my name, handwritten in block letters. I used my letter opener to slit the top. Inside was a single photocopy. The paper was old, grainy, the kind that had been copied a dozen times. It was a settlement agreement. My heart hammered against my ribs as I scanned the document. It was from White and Lyle, LLP. The date was from 7 years ago, but almost everything was redacted. Thick black bars covered the plaintiff's name, the nature of the claim, and the settlement amount. The only things visible were the firm's letterhead and the signature block of a junior partner who had left the state years ago. Stuck to the front was a yellow sticky note. "He knows what he did." That was it. 5 words. I sat there for a long time, the paper trembling in my hand. He knows what he did. Who was he? Graham? And what did he do? I reached for my phone. I did not think. I just dialed. Graham answered on the second ring. "White, it is me," I said. "Ella," he said. "To what do I owe the pleasure? Calling to ask for a loan?" I ignored the jab. "I just got something in the mail. A redacted settlement agreement from your firm. From 7 years ago. No context. Just a note that says, you know what you did." There was a silence on the line. It lasted 3 seconds too long. "I have no idea what you're talking about," Graham said smoothly. "We settle hundreds of cases. Ella, it is the nature of the business. You would know that if you had a real caseload. Do not lie to me." I said, "Who sent this?" Graham laughed. It was a low, dismissive sound. "You are paranoid. It is probably some disgruntled ex-client trying to stir the pot. Or maybe you sent it to yourself to feel important. I am finally in the room." "Graham," I said, "I just signed North Vale. I expected him to be surprised. I expected him to be angry. Instead," his voice dropped an octave. It became almost gentle. "North Vale," he repeated. "That is a big bite. Ella, a very big bite. I can handle it. Listen to me," he said, and for the first time, he sounded less like a rival and more like a warning siren. "You think you want to sit at the table, but you do not know the rules. People get hurt at this level. Be careful who you trust." "What does that mean?" I demanded. "It means watch your back," he said, and then he hung up. I stared at the phone. My hands were shaking. I locked the photocopy in my bottom drawer. I needed to focus. I had a site visit at North Vale in an hour. The North Vale headquarters was a sprawling campus of glass and steel on the edge of town. It looked more like a tech company than a healthcare provider. Maya and I were escorted to a conference room on the top floor that overlooked the meticulously landscaped grounds. The chief financial officer, Darren Keel, was waiting for us. He was a man in his 50s with a face that looked like it had been eroded by wind and stress. He did not stand up when we entered. "You must be the outside counsel," Keel said. He did not make it sound like a compliment. "Ella White," I said, extending my hand. "This is my associate, Maya Hargrove." Keel ignored my hand. "Let us get one thing straight. Ms. White, this audit is a formality. The board is panicking over a few clerical errors. I run a clean ship. I do not appreciate outsiders digging through my filing cabinets looking for ghosts. We are here to help you." "Mr. Keel," Maya said calmly, "if there are no issues, our report will reflect that." Keel sneered. "Just stay out of the operational expenses. Stick to the compliance codes. That is what you were hired for." The door opened, and a woman hurried in. She looked like she had not slept in a week. Her blouse was buttoned wrong at the cuff, and her eyes were darting around the room like trapped birds. "I am so sorry I'm late," she said breathless. "I am Lynette Marr, compliance director." She looked at me, and her shoulders visibly sagged in relief. "Thank God you are here, Lynette," Keel barked. "Do not be dramatic. They are just lawyers." Lynette flinched. Right. Of course. The meeting was a disaster of tension. Keel blocked every request for data access. He claimed servers were down, or permissions needed board approval, or files were archived off-site. He was building a wall, brick by brick, Lynette sat silently next to him, taking notes, but I saw her hands shaking. When the meeting ended, Keel stormed out first. I lingered. Packing up my briefcase, Lynette pretended to help me with the projector cables. As she leaned in, she pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. "Do not look at it now," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible. "What is this?" I asked. "Keel said the archive folders are irrelevant," she hissed. "They are not. That list, those are the folders he marked as off-limits. You need to see them." "Lynette," I started. "Please," she said, her eyes filling with tears. "I cannot be the one to say it. I have a mortgage. I have kids. Just look." She pulled away and hurried out of the room before I could ask another question. I walked back to the car with the paper burning a hole in my pocket. Maya was waiting in the passenger seat. "That guy is hiding something," Maya said. "Keel, he is terrified." "I know." I said. "I started the engine, and we are going to find out what it is." The drive back to the office was silent. The rain had stopped, leaving the sky a bruised purple. I felt a heaviness in my chest. The warning from Graham, the defensive CFO, the terrified compliance director, the anonymous note. It felt like invisible threads were tightening around me. I walked into our office at 4 p.m. The team was working quietly. Jonah Cruz, our newest hire, waved at me from his desk. He was young, eager, and believed in justice the way children believe in Santa Claus. "Hey, boss," Jonah said. "You look like you went 12 rounds. Something like that," I muttered. I went into my office and closed the door. I sat down and exhaled. I took the folded paper Lynette had given me out of my pocket. It was a list of digital file paths. Server 4, Directory B, Subfolder, Retention/Zulu, Zulu. Who names a folder Zulu unless they are treating accounting like a military operation? I turned to my computer. I needed to log these paths before I lost the paper. I woke up my screen. There was a new email in my inbox. It had arrived 3 minutes ago. The sender was the Chief Operating Officer of White & Lyle, LLP. The subject line made my stomach drop through the floor. Confidential. Merger proposal. I blinked. I read it again. It did not make sense. I clicked the email open. "Dear Ms. White. Attached, please find a formal proposal for the merger of White & Lyle, LLP into Whitebridge Legal Group. Per the terms outlined, the combined entity would retain the Whitebridge name in some form, with the current equity partners of White & Lyle assuming a subordinate equity position. Graham White requests a leadership role as Senior Strategic Chair. We await your review." I could not breathe. White & Lyle was 50 times our size. They had offices in Chicago, St. Louis, and Springfield. We were 5 people in a converted warehouse. Firms like theirs did not merge into firms like mine. They bought them. They crushed them. They absorbed them. This was backwards. This was impossible. Unless they were drowning. I opened the attachment. It was a 60-page legal document. I scrolled to the bottom, my hand shaking on the mouse. There, on the final page, was the signature. Graham White, Managing Partner. The ink was digital, but the jagged, aggressive loop of the G was unmistakable. He had already signed it. He was not asking. He was submitting. I looked up at the glass wall of my office. My team was out there. Maya, Jonah, Tessa. They were working on cases, drinking coffee, laughing at a joke. They had no idea that a tidal wave was frozen right above their heads. This was not a compliment. Graham White did not give compliments, and he certainly did not surrender his firm to the daughter he called a failure. I looked at the signature again. He knows what he did. The note in my drawer, the fear in his voice, the desperation of this offer. It was not a merger, it was a life raft, and he was trying to climb aboard my ship before his own went under. But why me? Why the daughter he despised? Because, I realized with a cold clarity, if the ship went down, he wanted to make sure I was the captain standing on the deck when the water hit. I leaned back in my chair, the office darkening around me as the sun finally set. The silence was absolute. He set a trap. I whispered, and he put it right on my desk. I did not delete the email. I did not forward it. I just stared at it, the blue light of the monitor reflecting in my eyes. While the ghost of my father's laughter echoed in the empty room, "You will never be a real lawyer. Watch me, Dad, watch me." The phone on my desk began to ring. I did not answer it. I sat in the dark, and for the first time in 33 years, I did not feel small. I felt dangerous. I was the one holding the merger agreement. I was the one with the pen. But as I looked at the dark corners of my office, I wondered what kind of monsters were hiding in the fine print, waiting to eat me alive. The next morning, the conference room at Whitebridge Legal Group felt less like a place of business and more like a bunker 5 minutes before an air raid. The rain had returned, drumming a relentless, erratic rhythm against the single pane of glass that separated us from the alleyway. I had arrived at 6 o'clock, brewing a pot of coffee that was strong enough to strip paint, and printed 5 copies of the proposal. I laid them out on the scratched mahogany table. I waited. By 8 o'clock, my team was assembled. Maya Hargrove sat on my right, her posture rigid, eyes scanning the document with a hunger she tried and failed to hide. Jonah Cruz sat opposite her, slumped in his chair, his tie already loosened, looking at the papers as if they were contaminated with radioactive waste. Tessa Bloom, my paralegal and the person who actually ran the firm, stood by the door, arms crossed, her face unreadable. I let the silence stretch. I wanted them to feel the weight of it. "This does not leave this room," I said. My voice was low. "I do not care if your spouse asks. I do not care if your priest asks. If I hear a whisper of this on the street, the person responsible is fired before the sentence is finished." Maya looked up, her eyes wide. "Ella, is this real?" "It is real," I said. "White and Lyle," she said, breathing the name like a prayer. "They bill out associates at $600 an hour. They have the pension fund accounts for half the state. They are sharks," Jonah said. He tossed the proposal back onto the table. "Why are they swimming in our pond? This makes no sense. They are 50 times our size." "That is the question, isn't it?" I said. Maya flipped a page. "Look at the valuation. Ella, even with the debt load, their assets are massive. If we merge, we instantly become the largest firm in the county. We would have resources. We could actually hire support staff. We could stop taking court-appointed overflow just to keep the lights on. This stabilizes our cash flow for a decade, or it drowns us," Jonah countered. He looked at me. "You know who your father is. Ella, he does not share power. He accumulates it. The proposal says he wants a leadership role. Senior strategic chair. That means he runs the show. And you become a hood ornament. He wants to swallow us from the inside because you are the only one making noise in a market he thinks he owns." I looked at Tessa. She had not spoken yet. She was staring at the floor, chewing the inside of her cheek. "Tessa?" I asked. She looked up. Her expression was grim. "My cousin used to work in their filing room. She said, a few years ago, she said the culture there is quiet. Quiet is good," Maya said. "Quiet means professional." "No," Tessa said. "Quiet means fear. She said they are known for controlling narratives. If a partner disagrees with Graham White, they do not just get fired, they get erased. Rumors start. Sudden audits happen. They punish dissent quietly. If we let them in, we are inviting a virus into the building." I looked at the 3 of them. My team. We were a family of misfits, bonded by the fact that we were too stubborn to work for the big factories, and now, the biggest factory of all was parked on our lawn, offering us the keys. "Maya is right about the resources," I said, "and Jonah is right about the motive." "So what do we do?" Maya asked. "Do we sign?" I stood up. I walked to the whiteboard and picked up a marker. I wrote a single name in capital letters. Maris Calder. "No," I said. "We investigate." I hired Maris Calder 2 hours later. Maris was a forensic accountant who operated out of a converted garage in the South Side Industrial Park. She did not have a website. She did not have a secretary. She had a reputation for being able to find a missing nickel in a billion-dollar budget. She met me at my office, bringing with her the smell of menthol cigarettes and rain. She was a small woman, 60 years old, with hair dyed a violent shade of red and eyes that had seen every variety of human greed. I sat her down and slid the merger proposal across the desk. I also gave her the list of Northvale's board members and the redacted settlement agreement I had received in the mail. I need to know why, I said. Maris put on a pair of reading glasses that hung from a beaded chain around her neck. She flipped through the merger document, wetting her thumb with her tongue. She did not look impressed. White and Lyle, she said. Her voice was like gravel in a blender. High society. Why are they knocking on your door? Honey, you are small potatoes. That is what I want you to find out. I said, my father runs that firm. He has spent my entire life telling me I am incompetent. Now he wants to work for me. Maris looked up over the rims of her glasses. She studied my face for a long moment. Firms do not beg unless they are bleeding, she said. That is what I thought, I said. I will dig into their financials, Maris said. But private partnerships are opaque. They do not have to publish their losses like public companies. I will have to look for the symptoms of the disease, not the disease itself. How long? I asked. Give me 48 hours, she said. She tapped the proposal. And Ella? Do not sign anything, if they are desperate enough to come to you. Whatever is chasing them is faster than they are. After Maris left, I drove to North Vale. I needed to focus on the client I actually had, not the merger I did not want. The audit was already behind schedule. Thanks to Darren Keel's obstruction, the North Vale offices were buzzing with the midday rush. I badged in and went straight to the compliance suite. It was a windowless room in the basement, filled with servers and filing cabinets. Lynette Marr was there, hunched over a laptop, looking like she was waiting for a bomb to go off. Ella, she said, jumping when I walked in, I did not know you were coming today. I need to see the billing logs for the cardiac department. I said, specifically the coding for outpatient procedures. Lynette hesitated. She looked at the door. Darren said all requests have to go through him. I walked over and sat on the edge of her desk. I lowered my voice. Lynette, if I go through Darren, I will get the data next Christmas. I am trying to help you. If there is a mess here, the sooner we find it, the sooner we can fix it. If the government finds it first, nobody keeps their job. She stared at me, her lower lip trembling. She was a good person trapped in a bad system. I could see the conflict warring behind her eyes. Finally, she turned her screen toward me. Just look, she whispered. Do not print. I scrolled through the logs. At first glance, it looked clean. The codes matched the procedures. But then I started cross-referencing the timestamps with the nurse staffing logs I had subpoenaed earlier in the week. There was a pattern. Every Friday at 4 p.m, a batch of codes would be modified. A procedure coded as a level 3, routine, would be deleted and re-entered as a level 4, complex. The difference in reimbursement was only about $200 per claim, but there were thousands of them. It was not a glitch. It was a script. Someone had written a program to systematically move codes just enough to increase revenue without triggering the automatic audit alerts that looked for massive spikes. It is the smudge, I muttered. What? Lynette asked. It is like a smudge on a lens, I said. You do not see it if you look at the whole picture. You only see it if you look at the pixels. I turned to her. Lynette, this has been going on for 3 years. Who set up this system? She looked down at her hands. We used to have outside consultants. They set up the billing architecture. Who were they? I asked. She did not answer. Lynette, I said, who were they? She looked up, and her face was pale. White and Lyle. The room seemed to tilt. My father's firm? I asked. They represented North Vale for 10 years. She said quietly, they handled everything. Corporate structure, liability defense, compliance. Why did it end? I asked. Lynette checked the door again. It ended abruptly. About 18 months ago, there was a dispute. What kind of dispute? Access. She said, Our internal audit team wanted to review the raw data in the server archives. The partners at White and Lyle claimed it was privileged work product. They threatened to sue their own client to keep the files sealed. The board got spooked and terminated the contract. She looked at me with pleading eyes. It ended badly. Ella. Darren Keel was furious. He was close with Graham. When White and Lyle left, Darren locked everything down. He said we had to protect the institution. I felt a cold chill slide down my spine. The timeline matched. 18 months ago, White and Lyle get fired. Now, they are desperate to merge. And the billing fraud I just found? It started on their watch. I need to see the off-limits folders. I said, the ones you told me about, the Zulu directory. I cannot. Lynette said, I do not have the password. Only Darren does. I stood up. Then I'm going to get it. I took the elevator up to the executive suite. I did not wait for the secretary to announce me. I walked straight into Darren Keel's office. He was on the phone, staring out the window. When he heard the door open, he spun around. You cannot just barge in here, he snapped, slamming the phone down. I need access to the Zulu directory on server 4. I said, now. Keel stood up. He was a tall man, used to using his height to intimidate. He smoothed his tie. I told you, Ms. White, those files are administrative archives. They have nothing to do with your audit. I found a pattern in the cardiac billing. I said, systematic upcoding. It looks deliberate, and I have reason to believe the origin of that pattern is in the files you are hiding. Keel's face went rigid. You are overstepping. I am doing my job. I said, if you block me, I will have to note it in my report to the independent committee. I will have to write that the CFO obstructed a compliance investigation. How do you think that will look to the federal regulators? Keel stared at me. He did not blink. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He slid it across the desk. It was a memorandum, dated 2 days ago, signed by the chairman of the board. Directive 404. All legacy data archives. Prior to fiscal year 2024 are to be quarantined for data integrity review. No external access permitted without unanimous board vote. He got the board to block me. He had anticipated my move. You have your answer, Keel said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. The board approved the limitation. You can appeal to them at the quarterly meeting, in 3 months. I looked at the paper. It was a shield, a bureaucratic fortress. I am being set up. I realized they hired me to find the small stuff, the clerical errors, so they could say they did an audit, but they are steering me away from the body buried in the basement. I picked up the paper. This is a mistake. Darren, I said. He smiled. It was a cold, tight smile. Just do the job you were hired for. Ella, stick to the shallow end of the pool. It is safer there. I walked out of his office, my blood boiling. I needed air. I needed to think. I drove back to the office, the windshield wipers slapping back and forth like a metronome. My phone buzzed. It was Maris. I picked up. Tell me you have something. I have something, Maris said, and it is ugly. I am listening. I pulled the litigation history for White and Lyle. She said, not the public docket, the insurance runs, in the last 18 months. They have had 12 malpractice claims filed against them. 12? I asked. That is impossible. I would have heard about it. That is the trick. Maris said, they are all closed. Settled before a complaint was even filed in court. Confidentiality clauses tight as a drum. They are paying people off. Ella, big money, to keep them quiet. What are the claims about? I cannot see the details. Maris said, but the payouts are massive. Millions. And here's the kicker. Since those settlements started, 7 partners have withdrawn from the firm. 7? I repeated. That is a third of their equity partnership. Exactly, Maris said. The rats are leaving the ship. They are cashing out their capital accounts and running for the hills. Graham is bleeding cash to pay the settlements and the exiting partners. He is insolvent. Ella, or close to it. He needs my firm, I whispered. He needs your clean slate, Maris said. He needs to merge into you so he can dump the liabilities into the new entity and use your insurance to cover the gap. He is not trying to partner with you. He is trying to use you as a human shield. I hung up the phone. I sat in my car in the parking lot of my building. The rain was hammering on the roof. My father was not just a failure, he was a fraud. He had built a monument to himself on a foundation of silence and payoffs. And now that it was crumbling, he was willing to pull me down with him just to break his fall. I went home that night to the small bungalow I shared with Caleb. Caleb Rourke was a public sector attorney for the Department of Transportation. He was steady, kind, and believed in rules. He was everything my father was not. He was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of chili. The smell of cumin and onions filled the house. It should have been comforting. Instead, it felt suffocating. "Hey," he said, turning to smile at me. "Rough day?" "You have no idea," I said, tossing my keys on the counter. He poured me a glass of wine. "Talk to me." "White and Lyle," I said. "They are imploding. Malpractice claims. Partners fleeing. And Graham wants to merge so he can pin the wreckage on me." Caleb stopped stirring. He put the spoon down. "Ella, that is dangerous." "I know." I said, "You have to say no." He said, "Immediately. Send a rejection letter tomorrow. Walk away." "I cannot just walk away." I said, "I have a client involved. North Vale. There is a connection. If I walk away, I leave them exposed, and I leave the truth buried." "Ella," Caleb said, walking over to me. He put his hands on my shoulders. His palms were warm. "This is not your fight. You have worked so hard to build Whitebridge. Do not let his poison infect it. You need to protect yourself." I stiffened. The word triggered something visceral in me. "Protect myself?" I snapped, pulling away. "Is that what you think I need? Protection?" Caleb blinked, surprised by my tone. "I just meant, you sound just like him," I said, my voice rising. "You think I am soft. You think I cannot handle the deep water. You think I need to stay in the shallow end where it is safe." "Ella, stop," Caleb said. "I am on your side. If you need protection." "You are not real," I shouted. The words tore out of my throat before I could check them. Silence filled the kitchen. The chili bubbled softly on the stove. I stood there, breathing hard. I heard the echo of my own voice. It was not my voice. It was Graham's. It was the voice that had haunted me for 33 years. Real lawyers do not need help. Real lawyers do not show weakness. I looked at Caleb. He looked hurt. I slumped against the counter. I put my face in my hands. "I am sorry," I whispered. "I am so sorry." Caleb sighed. He walked back to me and wrapped his arms around me. I let him hold me. I felt small. "He is in your head." "Ella," Caleb said softly, "do not let him rent space there." I nodded against his chest, but I knew it was too late. Graham was not just in my head, he was in my blood. The next evening, I drove out to a diner on the highway, 10 miles outside of Ravenport. It was the kind of place where the menu was laminated and the coffee came in thick white mugs that were never quite clean. Graham had asked to meet there. Not his club, not his office. Here, I saw him in a booth in the back. He was wearing a trench coat over his suit. The collar turned up. He looked out of place, like a diamond in a coal bin. I slid into the booth opposite him. "Hello, Dad," I said. He did not look up immediately. He was staring at the Formica table, tracing a scratch with his manicured fingernail. "You came," he said. "You sent me a merger proposal." I said, "I have questions." "I am sure you do." He said, "I know about the settlements." "Graham, I know about the partners leaving." "I know you are bleeding." He looked up then. His eyes were bloodshot. There were bags under them that I had never seen before. He looked 10 years older than he had at the luncheon. "It is a difficult market," he said. His voice was steady, but his hands were not. He was shredding a paper napkin into tiny strips. "Don't give me the corporate line," I said. "You are in trouble. Why did you come to me?" "Legacy," he said. "Legacy?" I laughed. It was a bitter sound. "You spent my life telling me I was a disappointment. Now you care about legacy?" He leaned forward. His eyes darted to the door, then to the window, then back to me. It was the look of a hunted animal. White and Lyle is a name. Ella. It means something. If it falls apart, it all disappears. I built it. I cannot let it vanish. So you want to hide it inside my firm? I asked. You want to use my credibility to patch the holes in your sinking ship? It is not like that, he said. We can be stronger together. You have the clean record. I have the connections. I have the clean record because I do not pay people off to hide my mistakes. I hissed. He flinched. You do not understand. Sometimes you have to do things to survive, to protect the client, to protect the firm. Is that what you did at Northvale? I asked. Did you protect them? Or did you protect yourself? Graham went still. His face drained of color. You are at Northvale? He whispered. I am the independent counsel. I said. I found the billing patterns. Dad, I found the code shifting. Did you authorize that? He did not answer. He looked at the door again. Graham, tell me. He reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong, desperate. Listen to me. Ella, drop the audit. What? Drop it. Walk away. Say you have a conflict. Say you are incompetent. I do not care what you say. Just get out of there. Why? I asked. Because if you don't do this, if you don't take the merger and bury the past, they will come for you next. Who? I asked. Who is they? He would not say. He let go of my wrist and slumped back against the vinyl seat. He looked exhausted, defeated. Just do the deal. Ella, please, for once in your life, listen to me. It is not about respect anymore. It is about survival. He stood up. He threw a $20 bill on the table. Watch your back, kid, he said. He walked out of the diner without looking back. I watched him go. He walked quickly, his head down, blending into the shadows of the parking lot. I sat there for a long time. The waitress came over and poured more coffee into my cup. I looked at the black liquid. My father was the most powerful lawyer in the city. He was a tyrant, a giant, and he was terrified. They will come for you next. I realized then that my anger was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp fear. My father was not the hunter. He never had been. He was just another piece of prey, running from something bigger, darker, and hungrier than I could imagine, and he had just led it straight to my door. The office at 2 a.m. had a different kind of silence than it did during the day. During the day, the silence was expectant, waiting for phones to ring or clients to walk in. At night, the silence was heavy, like a wet wool blanket draped over the furniture. The only light came from my monitor and the street lamp outside that flickered with a rhythmic, dying buzz. I was digging, after my meeting with Graham at the diner. I could not sleep. His warning was looping in my head like a scratched record. They will come for you next. I needed to know who they were, and I needed to know why my father looked like a man who had seen his own ghost. I was logged into the county court docket system, scrolling through years of filings. I was looking for patterns. I was looking for the invisible fractures in the marble facade of White and Lyle. Most of their cases were standard corporate defense, breach of contract, mergers, acquisitions, boring, high billable work, but I was not looking for the wins. I was looking for the disappearances. I found it at 3:15 in the morning. It was a case filed 4 years ago. Karen versus White and Lyle LLP. The plaintiff was listed only as S. Karen. The nature of the suit was classified as employment/professional conduct, but there were no details, no complaint attached, no motions, just a filing date, and then, 6 weeks later, a dismissal with prejudice. Dismissed with prejudice meant it was over. It could not be brought back. It usually meant a settlement, a check had been written, and a non-disclosure agreement had been signed. I cross-referenced the date of the dismissal with the redacted photocopy in my desk drawer. They matched perfectly. I sat back in my chair, the leather creaking in the quiet room. Karen. Who was Karen? An employee? A client? A partner? I wrote the name on a yellow legal pad. I circled it 3 times. The ink bled through the paper. This was the loose thread. If I pulled it, the whole suit might unravel. The sun came up gray and reluctant. By the time Tessa walked in at 8 o'clock, I was on my 4th cup of coffee, and my eyes felt like they were filled with sand. Tessa took one look at me and set her bag down slowly. "You did not go home," she stated. "I found something." I said. I pushed the photocopy of the redacted settlement across the desk. I had been staring at it for hours, trying to read the words behind the black marker. I could not read the text, but I could read the shape of the paragraphs. "Look at the 3rd clause," I said. Tessa picked it up. She squinted. "It is blacked out." "Ella, look at the edges," I said. "The descenders. The loops of the letters that escape the redaction tool. And look at the citation code at the bottom." Tessa adjusted her glasses. She was the best paralegal in the state because she saw the world in data points, not narratives. She leaned in, her nose almost touching the paper. "That is a citation to the Illinois Nonprofit Corporation Act," she said softly. "Exactly," I said. "Why would a corporate law firm like White and Lyle be citing nonprofit law in a settlement agreement with an employee?" Tessa looked up, her eyes widening. "Unless the dispute involved a nonprofit client." "And what is North Vale?" I asked. "A nonprofit health cooperative." She said. I nodded. "And look at the phrase just before the citation. You can see the top of the letters. Failure to add. Advise." Tessa finished. "Failure to advise on reporting obligations." The air in the room went cold. It was the same language I had been seeing in the North Vale compliance codes. The same deliberate ignorance. The same systemic blindness. This case, this Karen versus White and Lyle, wasn't just a disgruntled employee. I said, it was a whistleblower. Someone inside the firm tried to flag a reporting error for a nonprofit client, likely North Vale, and Graham fired them. Then he paid them to stay quiet. And now the body is floating to the surface. Tessa whispered, "I need to confirm the timeline." I said. I stood up, grabbing my blazer. "Hold the fort. I am going to see the General Counsel." The General Counsel of North Vale, Marcus Thorne, was a man who specialized in saying nothing using as many words as possible. His office was lined with degrees he clearly wanted people to notice. I did not sit down when I entered. "I need the engagement letters." "Marcus," I said, "all of them, going back 10 years. Marcus looked up from his tablet, annoyed. "We already provided the relevant scope documents for the current audit period. I am expanding the scope," I said. "I have reason to believe the compliance failures predate the current administration. I need to see the terms of representation for your previous counsel." Marcus stiffened. "That is privileged. It is privileged to the outside world." I said, "I am your independent counsel. I am inside the privilege bubble. Unless you are telling me you are hiding documents from your own lawyer?" He stared at me. He was calculating. He knew I was right. But he also knew that giving me those files was like handing a pyromaniac a box of matches. "Fine," he said tightly. He typed something into his computer. "I am sending the file now." My phone buzzed. I opened the email. It was a zip folder. I scrolled through the dates. 2025, 2024. Then it skipped. The next file was from 2019. "Where are the years between 20 and 23? I asked. Marcus looked at his screen. He feigned surprise. "That is odd. They must be archived on a different server." "Those are the White and Lyle years." "Marcus," I said, "I will have IT look into it." He said, "It might take a few days." I leaned over his desk. My hands were flat on the mahogany. "You do not have days. You have hours. If I do not have those letters by close of business, I am noting the omission in my interim report to the board, and I will make sure to mention that the General Counsel could not locate the most expensive contracts in the company's history." Marcus turned pale. I walked out before he could come up with another lie. I drove back to the office feeling a strange mixture of adrenaline and nausea. I was getting close. I could feel it. But as I pulled into the parking lot, I saw something that made my foot slip off the brake. Maya was getting into a black sedan. It was not her car. It was a town car. And the man holding the door for her was not a client. It was Robert Staines, a junior partner at White and Lyle. I watched them drive away. The rain blurred the taillights into red streaks. I parked and walked into the office. Jonah was at his desk, staring at his phone with a strange expression. "Where is Maya?" I asked. Jonah jumped. "Oh, hey, boss. She had a dental appointment." I looked at him. Jonah was a terrible liar. His ears turned pink when he wasn't telling the truth. "In a town car?" I asked. "With Robert Staines?" Jonah looked down. He sighed. "It is not just her. Ella." He turned his phone screen toward me. It was a LinkedIn message. "Jonah, impressive work on the sweeping brief last month. We are building a new litigation tier at the combined entity, looking for leadership material. Let's discuss your future." Graham. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "They are recruiting you." I said. Jonah nodded. "They are offering a 30% raise. Ella, and attract a partner in 5 years. And you?" I asked. "Are you taking it?" Jonah looked at me. He looked torn. "I do not know. I believe in what we do here, but if the merger happens anyway, why not secure a spot on the lifeboat?" "It is not a lifeboat." "Jonah," I said, "it is a trap." "Is it?" he asked. "Or is that just your history with your father talking?" I looked at him. I saw the doubt in his eyes. It was not malicious. It was practical. He had student loans. He had rent. And I had a vendetta. To him, the merger looked like safety. To me, it looked like death. They are doing this on purpose. I realized. They are isolating me. They are courting my team so that when I refuse the merger, I look like the irrational, controlling daughter who is holding everyone back. They want to strip me of my soldiers before the war even starts. I walked into my office and closed the door. I did not slam it, but the click of the latch felt final. I was losing them. My intercom buzzed. It was Maris. I picked up. "Please tell me you have good news." I said, "I have news." Maris said, "I will let you decide if it is good." "Go ahead. I found out why the partners are fleeing." She said, "It is the insurance. White and Lyle has always been insured by Lloyd's." I said, "Since I was a kid, not anymore." Maris said, "They were dropped 6 months ago." "Dropped?" I asked. "Firms that size do not get dropped unless the risk algorithm decides they are radioactive." Maris finished. "They are with a secondary carrier now, a surplus lines insurer out of Bermuda. The premiums are sky high. I am talking 300% of standard market rates. And the deductible? $2 million per claim." "My God," I whispered. "It gets worse." Maris said, "The policy has a retroactive date exclusion. That means the new carrier is not covering anything that happened before the switch. They are naked. Ella, if a claim comes in from the old days, like, say, a massive healthcare fraud case, they have no coverage. That is why they need the merger." I said, "They need my policy. They need your tail coverage." Maris corrected. "If they merge into you, they can buy an endorsement on your clean policy to cover prior acts of the acquired entity. They are not trying to join you. They are trying to hide under your umbrella before the acid rain starts." I hung up. The picture was becoming terrifyingly clear. Graham wasn't just losing money. He was facing total ruin, and he was willing to burn my career to ash just to keep his own warm for a few more months. That night, my phone rang again. It was Lynette Marr. "Ella," she whispered, "I cannot talk at work. Can you meet me?" "Where?" "The parking structure on 4th. Level C. Please." I met her 20 minutes later. The garage was concrete and cold, smelling of oil and exhaust. Lynette was standing by her car, clutching a file folder to her chest like a shield. "I found it," she said. She was shaking. "Found what?" "The directive," she said. She handed me a single sheet of paper. It was an email printout. From 3 years ago. The sender was Graham White. The recipient was Darren Keel. Darren, the email read, "Per our discussion, the revenue recognition protocols have been adjusted to maximize yield on the Tier 3 procedures. The The risk of audit is minimal if the volume remains below the automated threshold. We have scrubbed the external logs. Proceed. There it was, the smoking gun. My father, in black and white, instructing a client to commit fraud. I should burn this, Lynette said, her voice cracking. If Darren knows I found this, I am finished. I will be blacklisted. I will never work in healthcare again. She looked at me, eyes wide with panic. You have to tell me what to do. Ella, do I hide it? Do I pretend I never saw it? I looked at the woman standing in the damp garage. She was terrified. She was exactly the kind of person my father viewed as collateral damage, a pawn to be used and discarded. If I were Graham, I would tell her to bury it. I would use the leverage to blackmail Darren Keel. I would use her fear to power my own ascent. But I was not Graham. We do not hide it. Lynette, I said softly, and we do not burn it. But we protect you. I said, I will draft an affidavit. We will frame this as you discovering the document during a routine compliance check and immediately reporting it to independent counsel. That makes you a whistleblower, not a co-conspirator. It gives you legal protection. But what about Darren? She asked. Darren is going to go down. I said, but you are not going down with him. She looked at me, and her shoulders dropped 3 inches. You promise? I promise. I said, I will not let them touch you. She handed me the paper. I put it in my briefcase. It felt heavy, like a loaded weapon. I drove home in a daze. I had the evidence. I could end it. I could go to the authorities tomorrow and destroy White and Lyle. But something stopped me. The warning. They will come for you next. If I blew this up now, the shrapnel would hit everyone. My firm. My team. Even me. I needed to understand the endgame. My phone rang as I walked through my front door. It was Graham. I stared at the screen. I almost didn't answer, but I swiped right. What do you want? I asked. His voice sounded awful, slurred, broken. He sounded like a man who had been drinking alone in the dark. Did you read it? He asked. Read what? The draft, he rasped. The merger agreement? I read it. Graham, I know you are trying to steal my insurance. No, he said. Not the insurance. The liability clause. Section 11.4. I frowned. I had skimmed that section. It looked like standard boilerplate. What about it? Read it again. Ella, he said. Read every word. Then he hung up. I ran to my home office. I dug the proposal out of my bag. I flipped to page 42. Section 11.4. Successor liability and indemnification. I read it. Then I read it again. My blood ran cold. In the event of any regulatory action, penalty, or judgment arising from pre-merger activities of the acquired entity, the surviving entity, Whitebridge Legal Group, shall assume full and sole responsibility for satisfying such judgments, unless explicitly carved out by separate schedule. It was not just about insurance, it was a transfer of guilt. If I signed this, and then the federal government indicted White and Lyle for the North Vale fraud, my firm, Whitebridge, would be the entity on the hook. Graham's firm would legally cease to exist. The liability would flow into me. They weren't just trying to hide behind me. They were trying to become me. They wanted to dissolve their criminal past into my clean future, leaving me holding the bag when the DOJ came knocking. It was a liability dump, a toxic waste disposal strategy, and I was the landfill. I sat there, the paper trembling in my hands. Why did he call me? If he wanted to trap me, why tell me where the trap was? Read every word. He was warning me. Again, he was the one who built the trap, but he was also the one showing me how to disarm it. He was at war with himself. The ruthlessness that built his empire was fighting with the last shred of fatherhood he had left. I looked at the clock. It was midnight. I could reject the merger. I could send an email right now saying, "Go to hell." But if I did that, they would just find another way. They would poach my team. They would bury me in motions. They would destroy me from the outside. No, I needed to keep them close. I needed them to think I was considering it. I needed to play along until I had enough ammunition to not just survive the war. But to win it, I picked up my pen. I circled section 11.4 with red ink. I am not going to sign. I whispered to the empty room, but I'm not going to say no. Not yet. I was going to invite the vampire in, but I was going to make sure I was holding the stake when he crossed the threshold. I turned off the light, but I knew I would not sleep. The game had changed. It wasn't just business anymore. It was a hostage negotiation, and I was the hostage. I sat in my office with Maris Calder, staring at the draft of my counteroffer. The rain had not stopped for 3 days. It felt like the sky over Ravenport was trying to wash the city down the drain. And I was just trying to build an ark before the water reached my neck. "We are not asking for permission," Maris said, tapping her cigarette on the edge of her coffee cup. Though it was unlit, "We are drawing a line. If they cross it, they get cut." I looked at the language I had drafted. It was not polite. It was forensic. Condition 1. Full disclosure of all malpractice claims, open and closed, for the past 5 years. Condition 2. A complete audit of partner capital account withdrawals. Condition 3. An explicit carve-out for Section 11.4. Whitebridge Legal Group assumes zero liability for any pre-merger acts, errors, or omissions of White and Lyle LLP. It was a dare. I was telling my father that I knew where the bodies were buried, and I would not let him rebury them in my backyard. Send it. I said to Maris. She hit the enter key on my laptop. The email whooshed away. We waited. The response came 40 minutes later. It was not from Graham. It was from the White and Lyle Executive Committee. "Dear Ms. White, we are in receipt of your counter-proposal. We are shocked by the accusatory tone and the bad faith nature of your demands. The request for confidential partner financial data is unprecedented and hostile. We are reconsidering the viability of this strategic partnership, given your apparent lack of collaborative spirit." Maris laughed. It was a dry, hacking sound. "Collaborative spirit," she mocked. "They are mad because you locked the back door. They are setting a narrative," I said, reading the email again. "They are using words like bad faith and hostile. They are creating a paper trail to make me look unreasonable. Why?" Maris asked. "If the deal dies, it dies. Why do they care about the narrative?" I stood up and walked to the window. I looked down at the street. I did not know why, but my skin was prickling. Because they are not done yet. I said, "The next morning." I found out what "not done yet" meant. I walked into the office at 8 o'clock. The phones were ringing, all of them. Tessa was fielding a call on her headset. Her eyes wide, Maya was standing by the reception desk, holding a tablet. "What is happening?" I asked. Maya turned the tablet toward me. It was a press release, issued by White and Lyle LLP at 7 in the morning. Ravenport. Legal giants in strategic talks. White and Lyle LLP announces intent to merge operations with local boutique Whitebridge Legal Group. The text below was a masterpiece of corporate spin. It spoke of synergy, mentorship, and unifying the legal community. It quoted Graham White as saying he was proud to bring the next generation into the fold. It made it sound like a done deal. It made it sound like I had already said yes. They went public. I whispered. Tessa put her hand over the microphone. "It is the General Counsel for the Manufacturing Union. He wants to know if we are still independent. He says their bylaws prohibit retaining counsel owned by corporate conglomerates. Tell him nothing has changed," I said. "Tell him it is just a rumor." I went to my desk. My inbox was full. Clients, local reporters, other lawyers. They all wanted to know the same thing. Was Ella White finally selling out? Was the rebel daughter coming home to Daddy? My cell phone buzzed. It was Judge Halloway. He had been a mentor to me when I first started practice. I respected him more than anyone on the bench. "Judge." I answered. "Ella." He boomed. "I saw the news. Congratulations. It is not a done deal." "Judge." I said quickly, "It is just a proposal. We are still evaluating. Don't be modest." Halloway said, "It is the big leagues. Kid, I always knew you would end up there. Graham must be thrilled. It is good to see you two finally on the same side. The family legacy is safe. I felt a sharp, hot sting behind my eyes. The big leagues. As if what I had built for 5 years, the late nights, the wins, the client trust, was just the minor leagues. As if I was just warming up until my father decided I was ready for the main roster. We are not on the same side. Judge, I said, my voice tight. Sure, he said, clearly not listening. Just don't forget us little people when you move into the corner office. I hung up. I felt sick. They were cornering me. If I backed out now, after they announced it, I would look like a flake. I would look like I couldn't close a deal. They were leveraging my reputation against my independence. I looked out at my team. Maya was on the phone, smiling. Yes, it is very exciting, I heard her say. We are looking at a major expansion. I felt a crack in the foundation. Maya wanted this. She wanted the prestige. She wanted to tell her law school friends she worked for White and Lyle. I called her into my office. Stop telling clients it is happening. I said. Maya looked defensive. Why? The press release says, the press release is a lie. Maya. I slammed my hand on the desk. They are trying to force us. Or maybe they are just excited. Maya said, Ella, look at the reality. We are 5 lawyers in a warehouse. They are offering us legitimacy. Why are you fighting this so hard? Is it because the deal is bad? Or is it because you cannot stand the idea of him winning? I looked at her. Is that what you think? I think you have a blind spot when it comes to Graham. She said, and I think it is going to cost us the biggest opportunity we have ever had. Get out, I said quietly. She left. I watched her go. I felt alone, truly alone. An hour later, I had to leave for North Vale. The board had demanded an emergency interim update. The boardroom at North Vale was designed to intimidate. The table was 40 feet long. The chairs cost more than my car. The entire board was present. Darren Keel sat at the head of the table. He looked smug. Ms. White. The chairman said, We have read the rumors about your merger. We trust this will not distract you from the audit. My firm is fully focused on North Vale. I said, The rumors are premature. Good, Darren said, because we need to wrap this up. The quarterly filing is due next week. We need you to certify the audit as low risk so we can release the financial statements. I opened my folder. I cannot do that. The room went quiet. Excuse me? Darren said, I have found significant irregularities in the billing codes. I said, I have found a pattern of systemic upcoding in the cardiac department. Until I can determine the scope and intent, I cannot certify the audit as low risk. This is ridiculous. Darren snapped. Those are clerical errors. We discussed this. They are not clerical. I said, they are algorithmic. Someone wrote a script to move those codes. That requires intent. Darren stood up. His face was red. You are fishing. Ella, you are trying to justify your fees by inventing a crisis. I move that we terminate independent counsel and rely on our internal review. I looked at the board members. Some of them looked annoyed, but others looked worried. If you terminate me, I said calmly, I will have a professional obligation to report the reason for my termination to the state regulator. You can fire me, but you cannot fire the facts. Darren looked like he wanted to throw a carafe of water at me. We will take a recess, the chairman said. I walked out into the hallway. My hands were shaking. I needed water. I went to the restroom. When I came out, Lynette Marr was waiting for me in the alcove by the vending machines. She looked terrified. She pressed a USB drive into my hand. What is this? I asked. The memo, she whispered. The one I told you about. Lynette. And the metadata. She said, I pulled the server logs. It shows Darren's login credentials overriding the compliance alerts. 82 times in the last year. I closed my fingers around the drive. This was it. This was the smoking gun. But I looked at her face. She was pale. She was sweating. How did you get this out of the secure server? I asked. I used an admin key. She said, I stole it from Darren's assistant. I froze. Lynette, I said, that is unauthorized access. That is a crime. I did not know what else to do, she hissed. You said we needed proof. I said we needed evidence, not stolen property. I said, if we use this, and they find out how you got it, any defense attorney will get it thrown out, and they will prosecute you for data theft. She started to cry. I was just trying to help. I know. I said, I put the drive in my pocket. I will handle it. But do not do anything like this again. I walked back to the boardroom. The meeting resumed. I did not use the drive. I could not. It was fruit of the poisonous tree, but knowing it existed changed my posture. I knew Darren was guilty. I knew he was lying. I will agree to a 2-week extension, the chairman said. But Ms. White, if you do not have concrete proof of malfeasance by then, we will close the audit. 2 weeks. I said. I left the building feeling the clock ticking against my neck. 2 weeks to prove a massive fraud without using the only piece of hard evidence I had. And in the background, the merger clock was ticking even faster. I went back to the office. The atmosphere was poisonous. Jonah and Maya were not speaking. Jonah was at his desk, furiously typing. What are you doing? I asked. Updating my resume, he said without looking up. Jonah, if we merge, I am out, he said. I am not working for Graham White. And if we don't merge, Maya says the firm is going to collapse because you pissed off the entire legal community. Either way, the ship is sinking. I did not have the energy to argue. I went into my office and shut the door. That night, Caleb came over. He brought Thai food, but I couldn't eat. I was pacing the living room, holding the merger draft. Sit down, Ella, he said. You are going to wear a hole in the rug. I cannot sit down. I said, they are winning. Caleb, they are squeezing me from both sides. Darren Keel is stonewalling the audit, and Graham is gaslighting the entire city into thinking we are already partners. Let me see the draft again, Caleb said. He put on his reading glasses. He was calm, methodical. He read legal documents like he was decoding a cipher. He spent an hour in silence. I watched the rain hit the window. Ella, he said finally. What? Look at page 52. The governance section. I walked over. Clause 8.2. The senior strategic chair shall retain veto authority over all matters designated as sensitive regulatory engagements, to be defined at the sole discretion of the chair. So? I said, he wants to control the big cases. I knew that. Think about it. Caleb said, what is a sensitive regulatory engagement? The North Vale audit. I said, exactly. Caleb said, if you sign this, Graham becomes the chair. He gets veto power. He can order you to shut down the North Vale investigation immediately, and you would have a contractual obligation to obey him. I felt the blood drain from my face. It is not just about the liability, I whispered. It is about the kill switch. He wants to merge so he can legally force me to bury the evidence against him. He is not trying to save his firm, Caleb said. He is trying to silence yours. I grabbed my keys. Where are you going? Caleb asked. To see him. I said, I drove to the White and Lyle building downtown. It was a glass monolith that pierced the night sky. The security guard knew me. He let me up. Graham was in his office on the 40th floor. The lights were dim. He was sitting in his leather chair. Staring out at the city lights, he held a tumbler of scotch. He did not turn around when I walked in. I told you to read every word, he said. I read it. I said, Section 11.4 and Clause 8.2. You want the power to stop me. He turned his chair. He looked small against the backdrop of the skyline. The Titan of Ravenport looked like an old man who was afraid of the dark. I had to. He said, You authorized the fraud at North Vale. I said, It wasn't just a rogue partner. It was you. You told Darren Keel to shift the codes. Graham took a sip of his drink. His hand trembled. The firm was struggling. Ella, 5 years ago, we lost the Transport Authority contract. We needed revenue. It was supposed to be temporary, just a small adjustment to the billing software. No one was supposed to notice, but they did notice. I said, and you fired the person who noticed. Karen? Sable, he said softly. Her name was Sable. She was bright, like you. And you paid her off. I said, and now the insurance company knows, and North Vale is under audit, And you are terrified. He looked at me. His eyes were wet. I did it to save the firm. Ella, everything I built, everything I wanted to leave to you. To me? I laughed. It was a harsh, jagged sound. You told me I would never be a real lawyer. You told me I was a joke. I lied. He said. The room went silent. What? I whispered. I lied. He said. He put the glass down. You were always better than me. Ella, you have a conscience. I knew that if you stayed at White and Lyle, I would break you. I would turn you into this, he gestured to himself, to the empty office, to the scotch. So I pushed you away, he said. I was cruel, because I wanted you to build something clean, something real. I stood there, stunned, my entire life, every insult, every dismissal. It was a strategy? And now? I asked. Now you want to merge? You want to drag my clean firm into your mess? I have no choice, he said. The regulators are circling. If I don't merge, they will audit me. They will find everything. I will go to prison. Ella, so you want me to save you? I said, I want you to survive. He said, if we merge, we can settle the claims. We can bury the past. We can use the combined assets to pay the fines. But if you expose me, it all burns down. I walked closer to his desk. I looked him in the eye. Did you ever believe I could do this? I asked. Not the merger, the work, the law. Did you ever believe I was good enough? He opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked away. He could not answer, because if he admitted I was good enough, he had to admit that he had abandoned me for nothing, that his protection was just cowardice. I have my answer, I said. I turned to leave. Ella, he called out, don't do this. If you fight me, I will destroy you. I know how to play this game better than you. I stopped at the door. You taught me how to play. Dad, I said, but you forgot to teach me how to lose. I left the building. My heart was pounding, but my mind was clear. He was not going to stop. He was going to use every weapon he had. The press release was just the beginning. I needed to move. I needed to strike first. The next morning, I made a call, not to Darren Keel, not to Graham. I called Alden Price, the head of the Independent Audit Committee at North Vale. He was a retired federal judge, a man with a reputation for absolute integrity. I need to see you, I said, off campus, alone. We met at a coffee shop in the suburbs. I did not bring the stolen memo. I brought my timeline. I brought the pattern of the billing codes. And I brought the email from Graham offering the merger. Judge Price, I said, I am formally advising the committee that this audit is likely to transition into a criminal investigation. Price looked at the documents. He was silent for a long time. You are implicating the CFO, he said, and your own father. I am implicating the facts. I said, what do you want the committee to do? I want you to appoint separate counsel for the executives. I said, Darren Keel cannot be represented by the corporation's lawyers anymore. His interests are adverse to the company. If he has his own lawyer, he might cut a deal. He might talk. You want to flip him, Price said. I want the truth. I said, and I want you to know that White and Lyle has a conflict of interest. They are trying to merge with my firm to suppress this investigation. Price nodded slowly. You are playing a dangerous game. Ms. White, I know. I said. I left the meeting feeling like I had just pulled the pin on a grenade. I got back to the office at 3 o'clock. Tessa was waiting for me. She looked pale. There is a process server here, she said. I walked into the reception area. A man in a cheap suit handed me a thick envelope. Ella White? He asked. Yes. You are served. I opened the envelope. It was a subpoena, issued by White and Lyle, LLP, on behalf of a confidential client. But that was not the worst part. Attached to the subpoena was a motion to disqualify counsel. White and Lyle was petitioning the court to remove Whitebridge Legal Group from the North Vale audit. The grounds? Conflict of interest arising from familial relationship and pending merger negotiations. They were using the merger I hadn't even agreed to, as proof that I was too compromised to be independent. They were claiming that because I was negotiating with Graham. I couldn't investigate his former client. It was brilliant. It was evil. If the judge granted this motion, I would be kicked off the case. The audit would be reassigned, probably to a firm friendly to Graham. The evidence would be buried, Lynette would be fired, and I would be left with nothing. I looked at the signature on the motion, Graham White. He had warned me, if you fight me, I will destroy you. I looked up at my team. Maya looked scared. Jonah looked angry. Is it over? Maya asked. I threw the subpoena on the desk. No, I said. He just fired the first shot. I looked at the rain streaming down the window. Now we go to war. The next 3 days were a blur of caffeine, dry toner, and the kind of exhaustion that makes your bones ache. The office of Whitebridge Legal Group had ceased to be a place of business and had become a fortress under siege. We were responding to the subpoena. It was a massive document request, designed not to find the truth but to paralyze us. They wanted every email, every text message, every draft note related to North Vale. They were looking for a slip-up, a stray comment where I might have expressed bias against my father, a text message where I might have complained about the merger, anything they could use to paint me as a vindictive daughter rather than an independent counsel. Tessa was the general of our defense. She had boxes stacked 5 feet high in the conference room. We have to privilege log everything, she said, her voice raspy. Every communication with you and Maris is work product. We cannot let them see the strategy. Be careful. I said, if we withhold too much, they will file a motion to compel. They want us to look secretive. I was living on 4 hours of sleep. My phone was buzzing constantly with rumors. The legal community in Ravenport was small, and the water was full of blood. People were whispering that I was holding up the merger because I wanted a bigger payout. They said I was leveraging the audit to squeeze my father. It was exactly the narrative Graham wanted. I realized the brilliance of the subpoena on the second night. I was reviewing a stack of billing records when it hit me. They do not actually want these documents, I said aloud. Jonah looked up from his laptop. What? They do not care about my emails. I said. I stood up and paced the room. This isn't about discovery. It is about the timeline. If we are bogged down responding to this subpoena, we are not working on the North Vale audit. We are playing defense. And if the judge grants their motion to disqualify us, who takes over the audit? The court would appoint new counsel, Jonah said. And who would the court pick? I asked. Probably a firm recommended by the North Vale board. A firm that Darren Keel approves of. A firm that will look at the billing codes and see nothing but clerical errors. If we get kicked off, I said, the evidence dies with us. White and Lyle swoop back in, or a proxy firm does, and they control the narrative. They bury the body and pave over the grave. We cannot let them disqualify us. Jonah said, we need to finish the audit. I said, before the hearing on the motion, we need to present our findings to the committee so it is on the record. Once it is filed, they cannot unring the bell. I called Alden Price the next morning. I need the committee to convene. I said, tonight. That is highly irregular. Ms. White, Price said, so is a subpoena from the subject of the investigation. I countered, we are running out of time. Judge, if you want the truth, you need to hear it now. The meeting took place in a private room at the University Club. The leather chairs smelled of cigars and old money. Alden Price sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 other independent directors. They looked nervous. I laid out the timeline. I did not use adjectives. I did not use emotional language. I used dates, timestamps, and dollar amounts. On January 4th, 2023, the billing code for cardiac catheterization was modified. I said, the revenue per procedure increased by 12%. This modification was not logged in the standard change management system. It was executed via a script that ran every Friday at 4 p.m. and reversed itself on Monday morning. I slid the graph across the table. This pattern continued for 18 months. I said, the total excess revenue generated is approximately $4 million. Price picked up the graph. He studied it for a long time. And the cause? He asked. It is not a glitch. I said. It is a deliberate override of the compliance software. We have identified the user account responsible for the overrides. It belongs to the CFO, Darren Keel. The room went silent. I continued. We have also found evidence that during the period of this activity, your previous outside counsel, White and Lyle, advised on revenue recognition protocols. We have requested the engagement letters to confirm their scope, but they are missing from the files. Missing? Price asked. The files for those specific years are gone. I said. Price took off his glasses. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. He looked like a man who was watching a dam crack. Ms. White, he said quietly. You should know something. I waited. We received an inquiry yesterday, he said, from the Department of Health and Human Services. My stomach dropped. A federal inquiry. They are asking about billing irregularities. Price said. They did not give specifics. They just said they received a credible external complaint. External? I asked. Not from an employee, Price said. From outside. I sat back. If the feds were already looking, then the clock wasn't just ticking. It had run out. And if the complaint came from outside, it meant the whistleblower wasn't Lynette. It was someone who knew the system, but was no longer in it. Someone like the person Graham had paid off years ago. I left the meeting with a mandate to finalize the report within 48 hours. Price promised to hold off Darren Keel, but I could see the fear in his eyes. He knew that when the federal subpoena landed, the board would be in the firing line. I called Maris from the car. I need a name. I said, I am working on it. Maris growled. The name behind Karen versus White and Lyle. I need to find her. Now. She is a ghost. Ella. Maris said, I have run the databases. No credit hits, no property records. She disappeared after the settlement. She is not a ghost. I said, she is a risk manager. People like that do not just vanish. They mitigate risk. She is somewhere safe. Look for nonprofits. Look for boards. She wouldn't work for a corporation again. She would go somewhere where the money doesn't matter. Give me an hour, Maris said. 40 minutes later, my phone buzzed with an address. Sable Karen, Treasurer, Ravenport Literacy Alliance. It was a small nonprofit downtown. Of course. I drove there. It was a storefront operation, sandwiched between a bakery and a dry cleaner. I walked in. The air smelled of old books and dust. A woman was sitting at a desk in the back, sorting through a box of donated paperbacks. She looked to be in her late 40s. She wore a gray cardigan and reading glasses. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun. Sable Karen? I asked. She didn't jump. She didn't look surprised. She just looked up, marked her place on her checklist, and took off her glasses. You look like him, she said. Her voice was calm, precise. I am Ella White. I said. I know who you are, she said. I have been expecting you. Can we talk? She stood up. Not here. There is a study room at the public library down the street. Room B. Meet me there in 10 minutes. The library was quiet. We sat at a round table in a glass-walled room. Sable placed her hands on the table. They were perfectly still. You found the settlement, she said. It wasn't a question. I found the docket. I said, and I found the pattern at North Vale. It is happening again. Sable, or it never stopped. Sable nodded slowly. It never stopped. It just evolved. Tell me what happened, I said. I was the risk manager for the healthcare practice group at White and Lyle. She said, 5 years ago, I noticed the billing anomalies at North Vale. I flagged them in a memo to the managing partner, to Graham. I said, to Graham. She confirmed. I thought he would thank me. I thought he would want to protect the firm. Instead, he called me into his office. He told me that I was misunderstanding the nuance of the coding guidelines. He told me to shred the memo. And when you refused, he fired me, she said, for performance issues. Then he offered me a settlement, 6 months of salary and a glowing recommendation letter in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement and a promise to never speak of North Vale again. Why did you take it? I asked. She looked at me with a sad smile. Because I was 35, single, and fighting a giant. If I had sued, he would have destroyed my reputation. He would have buried me in legal fees until I was bankrupt. I took the money. I survived. But you sent the complaint to the feds, didn't you? I asked. Recently. She hesitated. Then she nodded. I saw the news about the merger. I saw that he was trying to drag you into it. I knew that if he merged with you, he would hide the evidence in your files. I couldn't let him do that to another person. So you blew the whistle. I said, I sent the tip. She said, anonymous, but specific enough that they would have to look. Sable leaned forward. Her eyes were intense. You need to understand something. Ella, it wasn't just Graham. It was the culture. There are partners there. Rowan Lyle, Robert Staines, who knew everything. They liked the revenue. They didn't care about the risk because they thought they were untouchable. They are not untouchable anymore. I said, no. Sable said, they are cornered animals, and that makes them dangerous. She paused. They are going to blame you, she said. Me? I asked. I wasn't even there. It doesn't matter, she said. They are building a narrative. I still have friends in the secretarial pool. I hear things. The story they are crafting is that you were brought in to consult on the North Vale account years ago, off the books, that you were the one who suggested the aggressive coding strategies. That is a lie. I said, I was barely practicing law then. It is a lie the public will believe. Sable said, the nepotism narrative. The spoiled daughter who got in over her head, and her father tried to clean up her mess. It sells papers. Ella, it is easier to believe than a 60-year-old titan of industry being a crook. They will sacrifice you to save the institution. I felt a cold rage spreading through my chest. It was different from the anger I had felt before. This was not the hot, reactive anger of a disappointed child. This was the cold, calculating fury of a professional who was being framed. My father was not just trying to dump his liability on me. He was trying to rewrite history to make me the villain of his own story. Thank you, I said. I stood up. Ella, Sable said, be careful. They will burn the closest target, and your name is on the door. I walked back to the office in the rain. I did not feel fear anymore. I felt clarity. I went straight to my desk. I pulled up the drafting software. What are you doing? Maris asked from the corner. I am drafting a protective filing. I said, a sworn affidavit, detailing the exact date of my firm's engagement with North Vale. I am attaching my tax returns from 5 years ago to prove I had no income from White and Lyle. I am building a firewall. If they want to say I was there, I will prove I was on the other side of the city, eating ramen and fighting traffic court cases. My email pinged. It was from White and Lyle. A new attachment. Subject: revised merger agreement. Final offer. I opened it. The terms had changed. The liability clause, Section 11.4, had been softened. It now included a shared responsibility framework. It looked, on the surface, like a concession. But then I saw the date at the bottom, expiration. Tomorrow at 5 post-meridian. They were giving me 24 hours. It is a panic move. I said to Maris, they know the federal subpoena is coming. They need my signature before the DOJ knocks on the door. If I sign, I am legally bound. I become an accomplice. Do not sign it, Maris said. I am not going to sign it. I said, I am going to let it expire. And when it does, the war starts for real. But the war had already started inside my own walls. Later that evening, Jonah came into my office. He closed the door. He looked sick. Ella, he said, we have a problem. What is it? It is Maya, he said. I sighed. Jonah, I know you two are fighting, but it is not a fight, he said. He placed his phone on my desk. Look at this. It was an email thread. Jonah had been CC'd inadvertently on a reply. The original email was from Maya to Robert Staines at White and Lyle. Attached are the scheduling notes for the audit committee presentation. Ella is planning to present the billing timeline tomorrow. You should be prepared. I stared at the screen. The text blurred. Maya, my Maya, the one who had sat on the floor with me when we couldn't pay the rent. The one who had believed in the firm when it was nothing. She was feeding them our strategy. She was giving them the map so they could ambush us. Is she here? I asked. She is in her office, Jonah said. I stood up. I picked up the phone. I felt a heavy, crushing grief. It hurt more than anything my father had ever done. Graham was a scorpion. I expected him to sting. Maya was my right hand. I walked to her office. She was packing her bag. She looked up and smiled, but it was brittle. Hey, she said. Heading out? Maya, I said. Something in my voice made her stop. Her smile vanished. Why did you send the schedule to Robert Staines? I asked. The silence that followed was deafening. The air conditioning hummed. The rain tapped against the glass. Maya didn't try to deny it. She collapsed into her chair. She put her face in her hands. I am sorry. She sobbed. I am so sorry. Why? I asked. My voice was quiet. I didn't want to yell. I just wanted to understand. They promised me security, she said, her voice muffled by her hands. Robert said that if the merger went through, I would be a partner, he said. He said this firm was going to sink. Ella. He said you were going to drag us all down with your vendetta. And you believed him? I have a student loan payment of $2,000 a month, she said, looking up. Her face was streaked with tears. I have parents who need help. I cannot afford to be a martyr. Ella. I was scared. Fear. It always came back to fear. My father's fear of irrelevance. Darren Keel's fear of getting caught. Maya's fear of instability. Fear made ordinary people do terrible things. It made them betray the people they loved. I looked at her. I saw the younger version of myself, the one who just wanted to be safe. I'm not going to fire you, I said. Maya blinked. What? If I fire you now, it confirms the narrative that we are in chaos, I said, and it gives them a martyr. But you are off the North Vale case, completely. You do not touch a file. You do not sit in a meeting. You answer the phones, and you handle the traffic court overflow. Ella, please, she whispered, give me your phone. I said, and your laptop. She handed them over. Her hands were shaking. Go home, Maya, I said. We will talk when this is over. She left. I watched her walk out the door. Her shoulders hunched. I had lost her. Even if she stayed, the trust was gone. It was a casualty of the war. I went back to my office and sat in the dark. I felt older. I felt the weight of every year of the 100 years of experience I didn't actually have, but felt in my bones. The next morning, the final blow landed. It came via courier. A heavy envelope with the seal of the State Regulatory Board. Notice of public hearing. In the matter of North Vale Health Cooperative and related entities. I scanned the document. It was a mandatory hearing to address the governance irregularities and the potential conflicts of interest regarding legal representation. And there, listed as a party of interest, was Whitebridge Legal Group. They had done it. They had dragged me onto the stage. The hearing was scheduled for 3 days from now. It would be public. The press would be there. The board would be there. My father would be there. They were forcing a confrontation. They believed that under the lights, in front of the cameras, I would crumble. They believed I would sign the merger to save face, or that I would be humiliated so badly that I would never practice law again. I looked at the notice. I picked up my pen. They want a show. I whispered. I thought about Sable Karen, hiding in a library. I thought about Lynette Marr, terrified in a parking garage. I thought about Maya, broken by the promise of safety. And I thought about my father, sitting in his tower, drinking scotch and waiting for me to fold. He thought he was the only real lawyer in the family. He thought he could write the ending of this story because he had always held the pen. But he had forgotten one thing. I was the one with the evidence. I am going to give them a show, I said. I called Tessa. Get the files. I said, all of them. And call the dry cleaner. I need my best suit. The trap was closing. But traps only work if the animal doesn't know it's there. I knew, and I wasn't trying to escape anymore. I was waiting for the hunter to come check the snare. The suit I chose for the hearing was navy blue. It was not a statement piece. It was armor. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my bedroom, smoothing the lapel, checking for lint, checking for weakness. It was 6 in the morning on a Tuesday, and the sky outside was the color of a fresh bruise. Caleb sat on the edge of the bed. He was fully dressed, his tie knotted tight. He held a mug of coffee in both hands, staring at the floor. "You do not have to do this alone," he said. "I can sit at the table with you." "No," I said. I turned away from the mirror. "If you sit with me, they will say I needed a man to hold my hand. They will say I needed a public sector lawyer to navigate the regulations. I have to walk in there alone." Caleb stood up. He walked over and put his hands on my shoulders. "Just remember what we talked about," he said. "Do not protect him. If Graham goes down, let him fall. If you try to catch him, he will pull you over the edge." "I am not trying to catch him," I said, but I wasn't trying to push him, either. That was the hardest part. I had spent 3 days preparing for this hearing, and every hour felt like I was preparing a eulogy for a man who was still alive. I had rehearsed my answers. I had stripped them of emotion. I had removed the anger, the hurt, the childhood need for validation. I had turned myself into a machine of facts and dates. Truth without theatrics. That was the strategy. I drove to the municipal building alone. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the streets slick and black. The air was cold. When I walked up the marble steps, I saw the cameras. There were news vans parked along the curb. The local press had smelled blood. They were not here for a regulatory hearing about healthcare billing codes. They were here for the soap opera, father versus daughter, the lion in winter versus the cub he tried to eat. I kept my head down. I did not answer the questions shouted at me. "Ms. White, is it true you are merging?" "Ms. White, are you testifying against your father?" "Ella, look this way." I pushed through the heavy oak doors and into the chamber. It was a cavernous room, smelling of floor wax and old paper. The regulatory panel sat on a raised dais at the front, 3 men and 2 women, looking down at the gallery with bored expressions. On the left side of the aisle sat the North Vale contingent. Darren Keel looked pale, sweating through his expensive shirt. The board members sat behind him, stiff and silent. On the right side sat White and Lyle. There were 6 of them, a phalanx of suits, and in the center, looking like a king in exile, was Graham White. He looked older. The studio lighting of his office usually hid the lines around his eyes, but here, under the harsh fluorescent buzzing of the municipal hall, he looked gray. He was not looking at his notes. He was looking at the door. He was looking at me. I did not look back. I walked to the small table in the center of the room, the one reserved for the independent counsel. I set down my briefcase. I took out my notepad, my pen, and the single bottle of water I had allowed myself. The hearing began with the drone of procedural language. The chair of the panel read the docket number. He read the scope of the inquiry. He read the names of the parties. And then, the theater started. Rowan Lyle, the senior litigation partner at White and Lyle, stood up. Rowan was a man who smiled with his teeth, but never his eyes. He walked to the podium like he owned the building. "Mr. Chairman," he said, his voice smooth as oil, "we are here today to discuss a tragedy of errors, a tragedy caused by a lack of experience. White and Lyle has served this community for 40 years. We have an impeccable record. The allegations before you are the result of a misunderstanding, fueled by a young attorney who, frankly, was unprepared for the complexity of a healthcare audit." He turned and pointed a finger at me. "Ms. White has done an admirable job building her small practice," Rowan continued. "But when one steps into the deep end without knowing how to swim, one tends to thrash about, and in her panic, she has mistaken standard accounting practices for malfeasance." The reporters in the back scribbled furiously. This was the narrative, the incompetent daughter. I sat still. I did not object. I did not roll my eyes. I wrote a single word on my notepad. "Projection, Ms. White," the chairman said. "Do you have an opening statement?" I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. "Mr. Chairman," I said, My voice was steady. It did not shake. I'm not here to talk about my resume. I am here to talk about math. And the math at North Vale does not add up. I sat down. The room rippled with surprise. They wanted a fight. I gave them a spreadsheet. The morning session was a slog of technical testimony. Auditors presented charts. Compliance officers presented policy documents. It was dry, boring, and necessary. But just before the lunch recess, the door at the back of the chamber opened. A woman walked in. She was wearing a gray raincoat. She carried a manila envelope. The room went quiet, not because they knew who she was, but because of the way she walked. She walked with the absolute, terrifying calm of a person who has nothing left to lose. It was Sable Karen. She walked past the reporters. She walked past the North Vale table. She walked past the White and Lyle table. Graham went rigid. He stared at her as if she were a ghost rising from the floorboards. Sable approached the clerk's desk. She handed him the envelope. "I am submitting a sworn declaration," she said. Her voice carried to the back of the room, regarding the pattern of practice at White and Lyle, LLP, between the years 2018 and 2023. Rowan Lyle jumped up. "Objection. This is an ambuscade. We have not given notice of this witness." The chairman looked at the envelope. He looked at Sable. "Ms. Karen?" the chairman asked. "You are the former risk manager for the firm?" "I am," Sable said. "And that envelope contains the internal memos that Mr. White ordered me to shred 5 years ago." The room exploded. Reporters were shouting. Rowan was yelling about privilege. Graham sat perfectly still, his face draining of blood until he looked like a statue made of ash. "We will take a recess." The chairman banged his gavel. 10 minutes to review the submission. In the hallway, the air was thick with tension. I stood by the water fountain. I saw Sable standing near the exit. She did not look triumphant. She looked tired. "Thank you," I said to her. She looked at me. "I did not do it for you, Ella. I did it because I'm tired of carrying his secrets." She buttoned her coat and walked out into the rain. She didn't stay for the fireworks. She had lit the fuse and left. When we reconvened, the atmosphere had changed. The soap opera was gone. The room felt cold and dangerous. This was no longer a family squabble. This was an indictment. Rowan Lyle was furious. He called me to the stand, abandoning his plan to ignore me. He wanted to break me. "Ms. White," he barked, "you claim to be independent, yet you have been in secret merger negotiations with White and Lyle for the past week. Is that correct?" I looked at him. "I am in receipt of a proposal." I said, "I am not in negotiations." "You have exchanged drafts," Rowan shouted. "You have discussed terms. You are trying to leverage this audit to get a better price for your failing firm, aren't you?" I leaned into the microphone. "My firm is not failing, Mr. Lyle, and I did not solicit the merger." "You did," Rowan sneered. "Isn't it true that you were overwhelmed by the North Vale audit? That you called your father for help? That you begged him to bail you out? He was trying to trigger the little girl. He was trying to make me cry, or scream, or look at my father for approval." I looked at the chairman. "Preparedness is proven by what you disclose, Mr. Chairman," I said quietly, "not by what you hide. I did not ask for help. I asked for documents, and instead of documents, I received a merger offer designed to silence me." Darren Keel was called next. He was sweating profusely. Under the glare of the new evidence, Sable's memos, his defense crumbled. "Mr. Keel," the regulator asked, "did you authorize the script that altered the billing codes?" I relied on counsel," Darren stammered. "White and Lyle advised me that it was a standard revenue optimization strategy. So you admit the codes were altered?" Darren looked at Graham. Graham was staring at the table. "Yes," Darren whispered, "but I was told it was legal. I have a memo." He was turning on them. The rats were eating each other. Then came the dangerous question. The chairman turned to me. "Ms. White, you mentioned the merger offer was designed to silence you. That is a serious accusation. Do you have proof?" I reached into my briefcase. I pulled out the draft agreement. The one with the red circle around section 11.4. I do. I said. I placed the document on the projector. The text appeared on the screens around the room. Section 11.4. I read, Successor liability. This clause stipulates that if Whitebridge Legal Group merges with White and Lyle, my firm assumes all liability for pre-merger regulatory actions. I looked at the panel. They were not trying to acquire my talent. I said, they were trying to acquire my insurance policy. They knew this investigation was coming. They knew they had no coverage. They wanted to merge so that when the fine came down, it would be paid by my firm, not theirs. It was not a partnership. It was a liability dump. The room was silent. Even the reporters stopped typing. It was a kill shot. I had just accused the most powerful firm in the city of attempted corporate fratricide. Graham stood up. He did not wait to be called. He simply stood up. Mr. White, the chairman said, you are out of order. I want to speak. Graham said. His voice was rasping. He walked to the witness stand. He sat down heavily. He looked at the room. Then he looked at me. Is it true? The chairman asked. Did you propose the merger to shift liability to your daughter's firm? Graham looked at his hands. He took a long time to answer. I proposed the merger, he said, because I wanted her to be safe. A murmur went through the crowd. Safe? The chairman asked. By saddling her with your debt? Graham shook his head. You do not understand. The sharks were circling, the federal inquiry, the insurance cancellation. I knew the firm was going to fall. He looked at me. His eyes were wet. I wanted her inside the fortress before the walls came down. He said, I wanted to be able to control the fallout. If she was the surviving entity, I could guide her. I could manage the regulators. I could protect her from the worst of it. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. He believed it. He actually believed it. He didn't see the merger as a trap. He saw it as a shield. But it was a shield made of lead that would have crushed me. You tried to save me, I said, speaking directly to him for the first time. Yes, he whispered, by controlling me. I said, he blinked. You didn't think I could survive on my own. I said, you didn't think I could handle the truth. So you tried to hide it from me, even while you were handing me the bomb. I am your father, he said. It is my job to protect you. No, Graham, I said. It was your job to teach me how to protect myself. And because you didn't, I had to learn it by fighting you. The chairman cleared his throat. Mr. White, did you authorize the billing fraud? Graham looked at me. He looked at the ruin of his reputation. He looked at the end of his legacy, and for the first time in his life, he told the truth. Yes, he said, I authorized it. The hearing ended an hour later. The regulator issued an immediate interim order. North Vale was placed under federal oversight. An independent monitor was appointed to review every billing code for the last 5 years. The matter of White and Lyle's conduct was referred to the state bar for disciplinary action. It was over. The room cleared out slowly. The reporters shouted questions at Graham as he was ushered out a side door by Rowan Lyle, who looked like he was already planning his own exit strategy. I stayed at my table, packing my bag. My hands were shaking now. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a hollow, aching exhaustion. I walked out into the hallway. It was empty, except for one person. Graham was standing by the elevator. His lawyers were gone. He was alone. He looked at me as I approached. He looked smaller. The Titan was gone. Just a man in a suit that suddenly seemed a size too big. You won, he said. I stopped. I didn't feel like I had won. I felt like I had survived a car crash. I didn't want to win. Dad, I said, I just wanted to do my job. He nodded. He looked at the floor tiles. You were good in there, he said. Methodical. Cold. I learned from the best. I said. He managed a weak smile. It ghosted across his face and vanished. I was wrong. He said. The words hung in the air. I was wrong. 3 words I had waited 33 years to hear. About the merger? I asked. About you, he said. He looked up, meeting my eyes. I said you would never be a real lawyer because you were too soft. But you were not soft, Ella. You were just clean, and I forgot what that looked like. He took a step toward me, then stopped. He didn't reach out. He knew he had lost that right. I am sorry, he said. It wasn't a movie apology. There was no swelling music. There were no tears streaming down our faces. It was awkward and painful and too late to fix the past. He had still tried to use me. He had still lied. But it was real. I looked at him. I wanted to forgive him. I wanted to hug him and tell him it was okay. But it wasn't okay. He had almost destroyed everything I built, so I didn't say I forgive you. I simply nodded. Take care of yourself. Graham. I said. I walked past him. I pressed the button for the elevator. The doors opened. I stepped inside and turned around. He was still standing there, watching me. The doors slid shut, cutting off the image of my father, leaving me alone in the quiet hum of the descending box. I walked out of the building and into the cool evening air. The rain clouds were breaking apart. I could see a patch of stars above the city skyline. I drove back to the warehouse district. The office was dark, except for the lamp on my desk. I walked in. The silence was different now. It wasn't the silence of a bunker. It was the silence of a church after the service has ended. There were 2 letters on my desk. Tessa must have left them before she went home. The first was on thick, cream-colored stationery. It was from the General Counsel of the Ravenport Manufacturing Union, the client who had called asking if I was selling out. Dear Ms. White, we watched the proceedings today. It is rare to see an attorney choose integrity over easy profit, especially when family is involved. Enclosed, please find our executed retainer agreement for the coming year. We would be honored to have Whitebridge Legal Group represent us. P.S. You did the hard thing. That matters. I touched the signature. The hard thing. Yes, it had been the hardest thing. I picked up the second letter. It was on White and Lyle letterhead, but it wasn't signed by Graham. It was signed by the executive committee. Merger proposal. Dear Ms. White, please be advised that White and Lyle, LLP, formally withdraws its proposal to merge with Whitebridge Legal Group, effective immediately. We wish you the best in your future endeavors. They didn't admit why. They didn't apologize. They just retreated. I folded the letter and dropped it into the recycling bin. I sat down in my chair. I swiveled around to look out the window at the city. Somewhere out there, Graham was sitting in his empty apartment, waiting for the Bar Association to call. Somewhere, Sable Karen was reading a book, finally free of her secret. Somewhere, Maya was looking for a new job, learning the hard lesson that safety is an illusion. And I was here. I looked at the nameplate on my desk. Ella White, partner. I wasn't playing lawyer anymore. I never had been. I picked up a file from the stack. The North Vale Oversight Report. It was due in the morning. I clicked my pen. I opened the file. I got to work. Thank you so much for listening to Dad Said You'll Never Be a Real Lawyer. His firm applied to mine. It has been a journey walking in Ella's shoes, navigating the murky waters of family, betrayal, and justice. I hope you enjoyed this story of resilience and truth. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please leave a comment below with your city or country. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this series, please make sure to subscribe to the Revenge Stories channel so you do not miss the next drama. And tell me in the comments, do you think Ella should have forgiven Graham in the end? Or was the nod enough? Share your thoughts in English. I can't wait to read them. Until next time.